This is a level 7. As of right now, we are at war.
Okay, so let me preface this. First of all, welcome to the Comics Lounge. We love that you're here. We love that you love the comics and the movies just as much as we do. But today, I'm here to call out every single comics fan that's ever said this. And simply put, I say it too, but I'm tired of hearing it. So, how should I word it? Pretty much every comics fan, not comic book movie fan, but every comics fan has said this. I hate that it's not like the comics. It's not supposed to be. If it was supposed to be like the comics, there would be no point in making the movie. I've heard this with Age of Ultron, especially. I've heard it a little bit with Ant-Man, heard it a lot with Iron Man and the Mandarin, heard it a lot with Doctor Strange. You know who you are. And the fact that the Ancient One wasn't the Ancient One, that it was a woman. I've heard it a lot with Black Panther. I've heard it a lot with pretty much the Infinity War saga, those two movies, not the whole thing. I've heard it a lot with Batman, the Nolan series, and the new Ben Affleck version. I've personally said it a lot with The Flash and Justice League, but that's allowed. Let's just put that out there and leave it at that. But I'm tired of hearing it because, honestly, if we wanted more comic book movies, why are we complaining that they're not like the comics? They can't be like the comics. If they're like the comics, here's the issue. Here's what we run into when a movie ends up being exactly like the book. We get to a movie where we're comparing it directly to the book. And people have done that with Harry Potter, and a lot of people who read the Harry Potter books don't like the movies as much as they like the books, and a lot of people who like the movies don't like the books as much as they like the movie. And again, if it was exactly the same, there would be no point to watch it. Obviously, there are movies that ruin the books, and those are more reserved for those movies that are based on the hardcover classic books that really speak to. It's supposed to be a direct correlation, and it's not. One of the ones that I think of about that is like Percy Jackson. They kind of killed that book with that movie. It wasn't as good because of the change in the villains and whatnot. But when you have 80 years, let's just talk Marvel. I'm not going to talk DC. I'm only going to talk Marvel because we know DC hasn't been doing this well. And we know that they've been going so far off script that it's not working out proper for them. And they've kind of started to see it, and they're starting to kind of right the ship with Wonder Woman and Wonder Woman 1984, a little bit with Aquaman. But I'm just going to say it. The storyline in Justice League, the storyline in Batman vs. Superman was a train wreck, and I'm really looking forward to the Batman fixing it. Joker kind of started to, but he's technically, as they've said, outside of that, but I'm not going to get into that. One of the things that I hate when people say this are, well, I don't like that this wasn't this. Well, yeah, it can't be because then you'd expect it. So I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning of the MCU and start there. People did not like that Iron Man took place in the time period that the movie came out. Let me say that again. People did not like that Iron Man took place in 2008. I don't know. It had to be done, guys. Let's think about it for a second. You have a movie that comes out and takes place in the year it came out. Most movies do that, right? To go back and unmodernize Iron Man simply to fit the comics would have done it a disservice. And that is the reason I'm tired of hearing this. Captain America needed to be frozen in ice to then come back, or come to 2012, I think 2012 ish, that time period, in order to truly get his origin, because you can't change Captain America's origin. It is what it is. If you change Iron Man's origin, Iron Man is a human. He is not an enhanced soldier. He doesn't have a serum. He would have not have survived being frozen in ice. The MCU is not about fairy tales. It doesn't. I strongly believe that the MCU wants these characters to be as real as possible, and it makes sense that someone who was injected with a super soldier serum comes back from being frozen and is all good to go. We can all agree on that, I hope. With that being said, we need to stop saying that it's not as good because it's not the comics. You are more than, I'm not saying that you can't be pissed off that they completely turned around something. I get it, I understand, but you can't take a movie and drag it down because you're comparing it to something that it never was. That movie is not the comics. The comics are source material, and this is what I've been saying for many, many years now. The comics are simply source material for all of these movies. If we take them at that and not at face value, that a comic is what it is where we get ideas from, the movies become better. We end up getting a movie where genuinely we have these amazing characters that play off of each other and really do those movies justice. Ant-Man did not need to be Hank Pym. A lot of people said it did. It was perfectly fine being Scott Lang and in the first iteration that we ever saw because it had to fit into the time period, and you don't want to make Hank Pym the same age as Tony Stark. It doesn't make sense, so to speak. It needed to be what it was. And I honestly feel that as comic fans, we need to stop complaining and start loving the movies for the movies. Start loving that they are different. Start loving that we are just pulling from source material, not that we're taking all of this at face value and saying, I'm going to turn Amazing Spider-Man 1 through 5 and make that a movie. Because then you're not coming up with any new ideas. It's that simple. I love that these comic book movies are coming up with new ideas. I loved that Arrow came up with a whole new concept for Ra's al Ghul. And genuinely, that's what we need to see. We need to see characters evolve into different versions of themselves and become different or take different places up in different movies, because that's what would normally happen. It wouldn't, if I were to take all the times Iron Man fought Obadiah Stane and put it into one movie, it would be so disjointed it wouldn't be even funny. To take it and truly turn it into Iron Man's origin story, like Dan said, and have a villain move a story along and create this idea of Iron Man who truly believed in and died believing the best kind of weapon is one you only have to fire once. That's why the gauntlet probably never would have worked for Thanos, but we'll get into that in another movie. That is the true reason why we need to stop complaining about all of these comic books turned movie. Genuinely, we need to stop comparing and having our biggest complaint be that was the sole difference, the sole reason why we didn't like it. They're never going to be just like the movie. They're going to have to change. I wanted to kind of talk about that. I had a huge bone to pick with a lot of comic book fans for a long time, so I needed to get that off my chest and kind of let you guys know that. So again, as always, after all that, keep it casual.